I'm Agent Scott,
And I'm Cam the Provocateur.
and we're from the Spy Hards Movie Podcast.
That's right. And you are listening to Pods Like Us, the podcast that has a license to thrill.
Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm speaking with one of the co-hosts of the fabulous Beatles-related podcast, When There Was Fab, Mr. Jon Stone. Hey, John,
Hello.
Thanks for speaking with me.
Oh, my pleasure. How are you?
I'm okay. I know it's a bit weird when you chat for a while and then suddenly it's like you're trying to pretend that you haven't talked before, and it's like, how are you? Well, I've been talking to you for 10 minutes, but I'm okay.
You know, there's just this basic civil politeness that you got to go through, step. So
That's true. That's true. But then
I
again,
know you're doing great.
When There Was Fab's probably the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably don't start the When There Was Fab chat until you've been talking for 15, 20 minutes, probably.
That's exactly right. You know, it's like, okay, do we start recording now? And I'm like, we haven't already started? I thought we had. So, yeah.
I'm always recording.
Well, okay. I'll keep that in mind. So are you recording the recording?
Yes.
All right.
Sort of. Well, Zencaster's recording us. Just a word to everybody, I'm using Zencastr for the first time.
Get Zencastr today.
See how it works differently to Zoom, which is what I'm used to.
Well, we just did a little commercial for it, so hopefully you can be compensated.
That's right. And When They Was Fab, that's recorded with Zencastr. So if you want to give either of us free use of your service, then we'll be very happy for that. Thank you very much. Sponsorship.
All right. So what do we talk today?
So first up, then, John, I'm sort of like I said before we started. It's more about you as a person, because I've already had Ed on the show, and we've spoken about how the show's put together and how he records it, and basically the technicalities of the show. So, an interesting one, because I know that you're a fellow musician. What's your musical background as a musician, John?
Well, are you talking influences or the history of it?
Well, the history. I mean, so okay, then we'll go to this one first. So, what would you say is your first musical memory, or your earliest one that you can, remember?
The first musical memory would be a little 45 RPM player that my parents got for me, and my first two records were The Ballad of the Alamo and The Naughty Lady of Shady Lane by the Ames Brothers.
Yeah.
Don't know how long I listened to those records, but they definitely made an impact. So, it was that, and, I was born in southern part of the United States in Texas. And so, I listened to the radio, which was different in my youth because it was wide ranging, and you could hear Frank Sinatra and Roger Miller and the Beatles and Donovan, and it was just all there. So It was a completely different listening experience than it is now. And my parents were both musicians. My mother taught strings in the public schools, and my dad sang barbershop.
Wow.
And so music was always in the house, and I listened to soundtrack albums, and I was definitely into music. But then, the Beatles showed up, and it totally wiped everything else out. It's like the slate is clean. I'm listening to this.
So, when did you first hear the Beatles and think, "Wow, what was that actual moment"?
Well, I'm a first generation, So first memory was Ed Sullivan. I had heard "I Want to Hold Your Hand" on the radio, and it was like the big song. School kids were talking about it. And so when they showed up on Sullivan's show, it was like, oh my gosh. And then there was just this onslaught of fan magazines and, the radio constantly pushing them. And here in the States, with the top 5 all being Beatles songs, plus others lower down in the charts, it was, all encompassing. My sister was 3 years older, and so she was really in the demographic, and so the initial things were all hers.
Yeah.
But I listened to them.
Yeah, I don't know. I was going to go somewhere with that, and completely lost track what I was going to say there. But I mean, really, radio stations like you were mentioning. To me personally, I prefer radio stations that are like that aren't specific to a type of music, because I have a love of all sorts of music. Like when I was talking to somebody this morning in one of their shows as a guest, I was going to mention before we started this that I seem to be throwing out names there, like I was mentioning Bob Dylan, and obviously the Beatles came into it, and Queen, and
Right.
And then surprised him, because then I started bringing in obviously Ravi Shankar. I have a love of Ravi and his daughter Anushka Shankar as well.
Yes.
And then suddenly caught him out, because I'm throwing out Philip Glass and Steve Reich and those sort of artists, and he's sort of saying, wow, I never really expected you to come out with things like that. And I said, well, people, you don't always, people surprise you, and I think that's one of the good things. But also, I think it shows that I think it's good to have, a wide, varied taste in different types of media.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that group of names, because one of my favorite albums is called Passages by Ravi Shankar and Philip Glass.
Absolutely.
It's just amazing.
So, what was it? Was it Sounds of India or something? I picked as one of my albums to take with me to a desert island. I think that was
right.
Because
I would take 10 albums and then forget the record player. So
yes, and then curse yourself for forgetting the record player.
All I could do is just sit and look at the album covers. Anyway.
Well, yeah, I picked albums. I think all of them are from that era where packaging was all a part of the whole artwork. So you get. So the Beatles one I picked would have been the White Album. It's a bit of a cheat, really, in a way, because I think one of the reasons I picked the White Album was because of how much is on there, in a way. But I would also say that it's probably my favourite Beatles album, the White Album, because of the variety that's on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're all albums from that period when, like I said, artwork was all a part of the whole thing, where now you buy songs now, these people that buy songs online, it's like a little picture on your telephone or something, and it's not quite the same.
Not at all. I remember the whole thing of, you're waiting for the next album.
Yeah.
Later fans had all the albums, and they could be introduced to the Beatles at any point in their career. Maybe you were introduced with Rubber Soul, or maybe it was Pepper, or maybe it was Abbey Road.
Yeah.
But I was waiting for each album, and the packaging was huge.
Yeah.
I remember distinctly going into a store and seeing these 4 beautiful color portraits of the band, and I wanted to buy those. And went up to the counter, and it's like, well, no, they're in an album that's coming out, which I got for Christmas, and you could just sit, even though it's a white album. You could sit with the poster and the pictures, and there just wasn't a lot of bands to do that.
No, I mean, it was when the Beatles brought out Sgt. Pepper. It was rare for albums to have the lyrics in them, and then you got the enormous poster with the white album, and I mean, I'm younger than yourself, so my introduction would have been through Paul. My parents' love of Paul's music and the Beatles, for that matter.
As a solo artist,
as a member of Wings.
Okay.
So my initial first memory would be of, funnily enough, I think it's not the album that most people would pick, but Red Rose Speedway would be my introduction to the music through that, because we had that, and I remember that being played a lot at home, and that was another one of those where you had all that packaging in there, and you had the cutouts. You could cut out all this, that, and the other, and sort of do things with them, and
the braille on back.
Yes, for Stevie Wonder, that message for Stevie Wonder. So we must have got that around the same time as we got the red and the blue.
That was 73.
And then later in the year they got the. I mean, I was only, blimey. So I was born in November of 1970. So I remember Red Rose Speedway as a 2-year-old.
Yeah, that had an impact.
It did, and then Band on the Run we got in November when it came out, or was it October, which would have been just before my 3rd birthday, and so and I became fascinated then. As I got older, I got even more into the Beatles, and I'm one of those people that I remember going to visit people's houses, and I do it to this day. I'll visit there, or I used to do it anyway. I don't do it so much now, because people don't have records. And the first thing you could do would be go to their records, and it's almost like you know who the person is based on their record collection.
That's absolutely true. That's how I introduced myself to a lot of friends. I would just sit in front of their record collection and go through it, and you could tell kind of where they were, what type of stuff they listened to. That was a way to do it.
But you also discover new music that way as well, because I found that I'd be looking at people's record collections and I'd be like, "Ooh, I've heard Owner of a Lonely Heart, but I've heard nothing else by Yes. What's the rest of it like? What's that like that you've got there?" And then I went down that rabbit hole and got into them.
Or when you find someone with 6 Cat Stevens albums, you go, okay.
Yeah.
Well, clearly this person has continued to be interested in them, and you do get introduced to new music that way.
Yeah, I mean, I remember somebody mentioned, what was it? They loaned me the vinyl album of Hot Rats by Frank Zappa, and that's how I got into Frank Zappa, was through Hot Rats, because he said, "Well, you like jazz, obviously because of Miles Davis. You might like this." So it's the way that it works with music, and I think.
Yeah, I had older cousins and an older sister. And so the college music that they kind of introduced me to, college music at that time, but that's how I came to Frank Zappa, I think the first time I heard was "We're Only in It for the Money," but
yes, yeah.
I got into later Rolling Stones because I had listened to them and then kind of dropped them, but then it was like, oh, that's good, and you do Elton John, Tumbleweed Connection. That was a huge album for me.
Yeah, that's a great album. That's a great period for Elton as well, around that era.
Yeah, I I tend to be a little critical of Bernie Taupin. I have this running joke in that he can tend to write lyrics that are just unfathomable, that make no sense, and but on that album, that is his best album, I think. He just really hits it all.
Yeah.
Hey there, this is Bobby with the Rock Guys Podcast, and you are listening to Marv Smooth on the Pods Like Us podcast. Check him out.
So,
I like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road as well.
The song or the album?
I think the song is one of Elton and Bernie's best songs. I love the song so much. Yeah. It's incredibly clever. It's one of Bernie's best set of lyrics. I think the way that he strings the whole thing together.
I agree.
And then I think it's the perfect marriage of Bernie's lyrics with Elton's music, and those progressions in that are incredible, and the melody. It's wow. There's no way that he can sing that now.
Right. I saw him once on television, at the Actors Workshop, and they gave him a book. Some student in the audience handed him a book, and he sat and wrote a song based on a page in that book. And you'd sharpen it up in the end, but what he composed on in the spur of the moment was amazing. I was just like, wow, that's talent, when you can just kind of pick stuff up like that and put together phrases that you're reading basically for the first time. I mean, his phrasing was kind of wow. Yeah. Well, so I haven't seen anything like it since I watched Paul McCartney this weekend. Just being able to pick stuff out of the air. Yeah.
Oh yes, when he did that with Get Back, that was astounding. To watch that. I think I posted up about it, and I put that shows you the creative how creativity works. I mean, you can see it there on camera. It's just like from nothing to a great rock song.
Something.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is, while they're still kind of playing around with it, they're not real sure what they're doing with it. Several times, the melody line they sing is the exact melody line to the Ruddles' Get Up and Go. Da, 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 da,
Yes.
da, da,
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, wow. Maybe Neil had a...
See, the Ruttles, they were really good because they did they were that close to the musical styling of the Beatles. It was almost frightening how close they were to those rhythms and to the melodies and everything, really.
The second album that they put out, which is called Archaeology, is, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's the best album the Beatles never made. It's just really incredible.
Yeah. Take that, Klaatu. Yes.
Indeed.
Who weren't the Beatles, but I do like their version of Calling Occupants.
Yeah. As opposed to the Carpenters.
So, so then you became a musician yourself then, based on this. I mean, what inspired you to? I mean, what instruments do you play, and And what experience have you got? What bands have you played in? I mean, have you toured and all that sort of thing?
I'm writing down all these questions. Well, what
Sorry,
happened
that was multiple
was
questions.
that's okay. What happened was, as I said, my sister was really into collecting the stuff, but then she kind of grew up and she wasn't as interested in the Beatles so much as other groups. But the first single I went out and bought was the Paperback Writer, and it was the flip side that just blew me away. I mean, I loved Rain. I listened to that on that little...
Rain is an incredible song.
Oh, gosh. You know, it puts me in a trance almost. And so then I was the Beatle collector, and you know, I have a son we talk about, you may be playing video games too much, but then I think my parents probably thought he listens to the Beatles way too much. Because I did. I listened, you know, I just listened to those records constantly. I can't really put a date to it specifically, but we had moved into a new house. I had to mow the lawn. And in mowing the lawn, I would just sing songs to myself, and not other people's songs, but stuff I was making up. And that kind of was the beginning of a songwriting career. And so I learned how to play guitar. And as I said, my mother taught strings. We had a piano in the house. And so I would play around with stuff. And, you know, by about 1970, when you were born, I was writing songs. They were pretty bad, but I was writing them. So, and
I think very few of us write good songs at the first point.
Yeah, or the 100th point. It takes a while because you know, and there'll be songs that you finish and go, well, that's pretty good, until about 3 months later when you go, wow, that really stinks, because you can fool yourself. But it just kind of progressed in a natural sense until I graduated from high school, and by that time had joined up with a friend who played keyboards, and we began writing together, and I still wrote a part, and that became the first band that I could call professional, where I would go and play in clubs. That was called Astra. And
Astra, good name.
We played...
Definitely a good 70s name.
Yes. And we played music of, you know, local influence. As I said, being brought up in Texas, there's lots of blues, lots of country. And so I tended to try to create things that would appeal to local audiences. And I did that for a couple of years until I decided that's not really, you know, what I loved. I loved a different kind of music. And the permission for me to do that came with Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
Who I just found to be a remarkable songwriter and lyricist extraordinaire. And so then I began to write what could be called, I don't know, at first it was kind of a pop, and then it was, you call it new wave. It eventually became what people called adult alternative. So I find, you know, trying to explain music in a niche is kind of hard, because I never felt like I was any of that. I was just doing what I did.
Yeah, it's the same as I mean the Beatles. I don't call the Beatles a rock and roll band. I think they're all sorts of genres, and I think for a lot of groups to just limit them to saying, "Oh, they're this type of band or they're that type of band." I'm not
Right.
particularly a fan of the whole genre defining thing. I just like music because I like music.
Yeah, right. Because music is a language. As I've gotten older, some of my friends have gone through the whole thing of some of my musical friends, like they didn't like, hip hop at all. And they may like some of it now, but at the beginning it was just, rap is crap. That's what I heard a bunch of times. But I kept thinking, well, it's a language. Maybe this wasn't written for you.
No.
It doesn't make it bad. It's just, you don't read Westerns. I mean, you kind of find what you like and you make that musical journey. But to just go, well, that thing over there is really bad, is stupid.
It's like somebody not eating pizza saying that they think pizzas are awful.
Right. That's exactly right.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris from the podcast Real Film Reviewed, and you're listening to Marv on Pods Like Us.
I can we jump into some of the Get Back stuff?
We can.
To mention something about the Get Back thing, I didn't know if we were going to try to do this chronologically or whether we could bounce around.
I don't mind bouncing around. I mean, I'm intrigued to find out your history with Ed and Lonnie as well. You're friends with both of them.
I do know both of them. Yes.
Yep.
Lonnie, I knew from just being in the Beatles scene in Houston. There'd be events where we'd have a Beatles night or things like that, and then we'd see each other at the Beatle fests, and we had friends in common. So I just had a long time history with him. He did video recording for several bands in Houston.
Okay.
So he was known to me that way, and just kind of knew each other through the Beatles scene. Never played with him or anything, but
No.
And Ed to me through, I guess, Lonnie, and I think Darren Murphy may have mentioned me as well, just because we're all kind of Beatles, and we talked about it, and we collected bootlegs and would trade and that sort of thing. So now Darren and I did do some recording together, but that's how I came to Ed. I didn't know him at all, and he called me up and we talked, and it was just kind of a matter of I didn't know really anything about the podcast world. I'd done a couple regarding a history project I'm working on.
Yeah.
But, it was just basically, hey, I have this Beatle podcast, and do you want to do it? And it's like, well, I'll give it a shot and see what happens. And it seems to have worked pretty well. We all never run out of things to say. And I guess that's probably the main requirement. Just keep talking.
The thing is that, I mean, there's always something happening in the Beatles world to talk about.
Absolutely. And that's the whole basis behind the podcast is that, when you, particularly this year with the All Things Must Pass box and the Let It Be box and the Plastic Ono Band box and the Get Back documentaries. I mean, we haven't run out of things yet. So it's been fun, and through that, I'm starting to listen to more podcasts because I just never really did that much.
No.
there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. It takes up your time.
There is. Are most of those podcasts Beatles related, or is it a bit open?
Well, they are now. Since I've been kind of introduced to this world, I'm doing research on this project, and it takes up a lot of time. So I have to go, what am I going to watch? Or how am I going to spend my time? So I have a little time set aside for Podcast Weekly, and now, but I also am watching The Foundation. So
okay, yes, I need to watch that at some point. So, what is your opinion of the Get Back? Just very go on, John.
I said it's very, very good. Foundation. It's well done.
That's good. So, what is your general opinion then of the Get Back documentary?
Well, my general opinion is I've had a great time watching it. I was careful to watch it all through first without trying to take notes or anything like that. Just to get the experience and not have to study, so to speak. So, lots of great moments in there. And, I have lines that float through my head from it. I think one thing that George said when Paul is trying to instruct him as to how he thinks the tune should go, and George goes, "I can only do me."
Yeah.
And I think that may be the beginning of him saying that. Before it's like he would accommodate and be bossed, but now it's like, it's me. And if you can play it and you want it that way, you could do it. But if you want me to be part of this, then I get to be me.
Yeah. I think John goes into a similar thing as well, doesn't he? Where he's mentioning that Paul, he thinks that Paul sometimes takes offence because they're not playing exactly what Paul envisaged as being the song, and essentially sort of saying, well, we are a band, so we play what we play, and but we're not Paul McCartney's sidemen. Essentially, I mean, and then
there's a difference between making suggestions and directing.
Yeah,
and so I think he'd fallen into the directing. There's one part that I thought was real fascinating, was when it's really early on and they're working on "Don't Let Me Down," and it's introduced by. John clearly had that chorus, but the verses are completely different. Different melody, different chords. As a matter of fact, it's kind of one of his list things where he goes, everybody's got to, he's not singing I've Got a Feeling, but it's a similar structure.
It is.
Anyway, they have that. And they're working on the "Don't Let Me Down," and George is singing a harmony, which kind of sets the tone of how that sounds. Well, Paul comes in, and they're playing around, and before you know it, Paul is telling George to play this certain arpeggio, and then tells Ringo what to play, and then he and George sing, or he's directing, sing this harmony to what John is singing. It's actually an answer.
Yeah,
I'm in love for the first time, and then they sing an answer back. And the song is taking a definite turn to something smoother and sweeter.
Yep.
Whereas John wants to sing, "Don't let me down," And so Paul is clearly taking John's song and directing it a different way.
Yeah.
And that's something John later talks about, is like sometimes, you just take it a direction we didn't want.
Yeah. Or that the song didn't want. I mean, sometimes Paul is right with some of his suggestions, but sometimes in circumstances like that, it's not quite right. It's not quite what the song needs.
I think that's exactly. I mean, you virtually quoted John.
Yeah.
Sometimes you are right, but sometimes you're wrong. And the dynamic in it, Paul just kind of gets really frustrated and puts his guitar down and stands up, and I'm scared of me being the boss, and then says, I don't want to do this on camera.
Yeah.
He's clearly. It's the narrative is it's George and John who are totally unhappy, but Paul is unhappy too.
Yeah, because he doesn't like where they are now.
Right.
I mean, it's a difficult one because I think there was a conversation with somebody who responded to something on a Facebook thing that I put it on there about the being absolutely wow moment of that with the Get Back, where he suddenly creates Get Back from thin air, and then somebody responded to it about Paul being the reason for the split or whatever, and I said, well, not really. I said, because if you think about it, Paul, some people might call it pushing, but from another point of view, you might see it as being guiding. He was sort of like guiding the Beatles to, well, Sgt. Pepper's is finished now. We need to work on this film and the music for Magical Mystery Tour, and then from there, well, we've got all these songs that we wrote in India. Let's put them all together and do a double album. And then 5-6 weeks after the double album's gone out, let's go into Twickenham and we'll do this, and we'll have 14 songs for a concert in 21 days. And so, yeah.
Well, certainly he was the a big force behind it, and I think that Lennon once said that they would have been just happy, staying at home. But that when Epstein died, he didn't have any. Oh God, what is the quote? I mean, he didn't think they could do anything. That they didn't know how to do this.
No,
Brian did this. They wrote music and made records, and that's what they did. And so he recognized that, and I'm sure McCartney recognized that and thought, well, we have to press on. Brian's not here to say, okay, so the next project is, the next film is, and so he had to do it because John wasn't going to.
Hey, this is Greg at Bad Counsel. You want some good counsel? Keep listening to Pods Like Us with Marv. And down with monarchy.
I mean, I'd arguably say that really the split of the Beatles was an inevitability in a way, because they'd all come to a stage where, and I mean, I think Paul realised it eventually, but they'd all come to a stage where there was too much there for them to be stuck. I mean, it goes to the thing of what George said, about having all that material and nothing to do with it. So they'd all got to that stage where there was too much material to whittle it down to a single album of 3 or 4 Johns by each, John, or 4 songs, or however many songs by each of them, and then George gets this, and maybe Ringo gets 1 song or something. But it had got to a stage where they were stifling themselves creatively. They had too much there to be able to put into that.
Yeah, I mean, you also see McCartney just having a wealth of material around him.
Yeah.
Because certainly there were a whole bunch of songs that were going to end up on Abbey Road, but there were other songs that weren't even covered in in the movie or the documentary. I mean, Every Night and Hottest Sun, and some of these other songs that were floating around. He had that, and George, in that period of time, he wrote "I Me Mine."
Yep.
He wrote "Hear Me, Lord." He wrote "Wah Wah."
Mm-hmm. He did,
and so he was, and we watched him kind of come up with "Old Brown Shoe." So he was writing pretty fast as well. So,
I mean, if George had been a bit more, dare I say, pushy with it, I think from the first couple of days when they were doing All Things Must Pass, if after that first weekend he'd have come back on the Monday, I think that would have been a really good Beatles song.
Oh yeah.
But he seemed to come back after that weekend, and it was like, I've got this other song. And we never saw or heard from All Things Must Pass ever again until All Things Must Pass.
Right. Well, and the truth is I Me Mine never comes back up.
No.
Right?
No.
So I Me Mine got included because it was in the film, and they came back in 1970 to record it. But For You Blue was the one contribution from George to this, as far as going into it. And we know he had a whole bunch of other songs laying around. So.
But like you said with Paul, I mean, you can see it even in the film, and like you said, there's some songs that weren't included in all of that, 'cause obviously you can't have a documentary film that's 56 hours long or whatever. So,
well, you could, but
well, we could. Thank you very much. We want that on the extended version on Blu-ray. Thanks.
Yes,
but,
yes,
yes, please.
Well, I understand they're going to put. There's talk about 5 more hours on the DVD when it comes out, and all that means is like people will be going, well, where's the other 45 hours?
That's true. You will never please everybody. I mean, even if you put out the entirety of it, some people will go, well, it's a bit over long. I mean, even now, some people are moaning about it being too long now. And
well, I would agree that this is aimed at all those people who have been with the Beatles, guaranteed. We'll go out and buy anything and everything that comes out. For casual people coming to it, it's a little long, and I watched the first part with my sisters, who are all totally familiar with my my Beatle thing, and the only way it remained interesting for them is when we paused it every once in a while, and they'd ask me, well, what does this mean? What is that? Who is that? And so, I kind of narrated some of the stuff, but everybody doesn't get to have my knowledge.
Yeah, I've had the same
as
thing.
They watch this.
I've had the same thing with Louise while we've been watching it, and that's probably why we've only got through part one at the moment. But so I've been doing that occasionally. Louise will sort of like say, oh, she'll sort of like stick a finger up or whatever now, so as not to interrupt. Right. She'll and then I'll press pause, and then she'll ask, she'll go, so who's that? And I'm going, well, that's the lovely Mal Evans, and
right.
I said, I do know that very soon you'll get a bit where he's got this incredible grin when he's doing the anvil. I mean, what a smile!
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I do notice
he loved those guys.
Oh yeah, for sure. I do notice in Jackson's version that Mal plays the anvil in time.
Yeah.
Whereas with Michael Lindsay Hogg, there were several times where it was like not right, and I don't know whether that's Hogg's editing or what.
But I remember I listened to. I don't know if you heard any of it. Did you hear the interview? I mean, crikey, they did well, didn't they? Things We Said Today. They had an interview with Peter Jackson.
I started to listen to it, but I was in the midst of our Thanksgiving holidays, and so I haven't had a chance to listen to it. I mean, Peter Jackson's clearly a fan.
Absolutely. And one point that he made, which I think he was completely right, was he was talking about the time of the piece. and saying that they were restricting him. I think originally they wanted a 1 hour and 40-minute film or something, and then Peter Jackson said, "Well, you want a 1 hour and 40-minute long film, but in that you want the entirety of the concert on the roof, which is 42 minutes." He says, so he goes, "You're losing 42 minutes there to that." He says, "That leaves you with 58 minutes to tell a story that lasts for 22 days. He said, "So you'll have 1.5 to 2 minutes per day to go with that." And he sort of said, "So that's why it's had to be as long as it is," he said, "because otherwise you're not really getting an idea of what goes on from day to day by just going clip to clip to clip to clip in that sort of speed." So I can see why he's gone that way.
Well, Michael Lindsay Hogg's initial cut of Let It Be was like 3.5 hours.
Yes.
And so, that was the original film. And I think that one of the reasons why Let It Be as a movie seems so disjointed is because they had to cut out 2 hours.
Yeah.
In order to make the film that was supposed to be delivered. And, I've always had a criticism of that, of Let It Be, because it's like whoever cut it together was not a musician. Had no understanding of how to cut things, and because it was just, random slicing of songs. And I know why they did that, because you're saving up everything for the big payoff, which is the rooftop concert. So you don't want to play all the songs first and then, play them at the end. It's not going to have the impact. But he had to slice that film up, which is why, Peter Jackson has a lot of Ringo doing what he called looning about. And he felt like, oh my gosh, all my good parts were taken out. And they were, and Peter Jackson has restored them. So now we get to see him doing that stuff. And
he farted.
Right. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. This is Ryan.
This is Avery.
And we are from the Frame by Frame King Crimson podcast. And you are listening to Pods Like Us.
Some great comedy in there. And, another telling scene is the, oh, wait. See, you've only seen the first part, right? Is that what you said?
Yes, but I've heard podcasters talking about it, so I sort of know things that are going to happen.
what's coming? Yeah, I don't want to, don't want to ruin it for you.
It's a strange one, really, because you say, no spoilers or whatever, and then you think, yeah, but I know where it turns out, really.
Yeah, well.
It's a story that you know where it's going, in a sense.
Yes. Some surprises along the way that I never, knew. And so that's cool. I guess here's a scene I can refer to, and that is when John and Paul and Ringo and several others are sitting around and they're talking about stuff, and John goes, maybe in an altered state. I don't know. I get from McCartney's reaction that he is, because he says something about, do we have to do this in public? But John is hilarious. I mean, what he says is incredible, but you can also see that Paul is slightly embarrassed, and not particularly patient with John's behavior. Can't say anything. It's John Lennon.
Yeah.
But he's not happy with it.
Yeah.
And then there's that whole
Louise
awkward thing
watching
with Peter
part
Sellers.
one, Louise kept saying to me, yeah. Oh, all right. Okay. Oh, yes. Louise said to me, she said she didn't realise how funny John Lennon is.
Yeah, he is. He's hilarious.
But,
He's so funny that even in the midst of that scene, when Paul is kind of put out, John said, John makes the reference of the Boy Scouts and masturbation, and says, I'm here to tell you, you don't go blind, but you get very nearsighted. and Paul just totally cracks up, even though he's annoyed, John Lennon is funny.
Dear me, that is funny. It's a good job I took a sip of coffee after you'd said that.
Oh, right. So,
okay then. So, what was your actual introduction to podcast?
Yeah, I would listen to things, usually NPR type podcasts, and scientific things that interest me. But I've been working on this book, and my cousin has a podcast coming out of Central Texas. He's a newspaper editor, and so I had been talking to him about my progress on this book, and so he asked me to come on, and we talked, and it apparently proved to be a very popular show, and so I ended up doing, 2 or 3 more. And that kind of coincided with when Ed contacted me about when They Was Fab. So it seemed like something in the universe was pointing me that direction.
Okay, so what actual, so the science podcast, what science podcast do you actually listen to? Well, what podcast in general do you actually listen to?
Well, let me think. What else? I've also listened to podcasts that my ex-wife recommended on Star Trek.
Okay.
So, I can remember subjects. I don't really. It would usually be I'd be in the car or something and listening, and it's like, well, you could listen to this on podcast, and I'd go look it up. But it just never really made that much of an impression on me, which I know is sad, in a show about podcasting. But I wasn't really paying that much attention. The information was good for me, but the platform wasn't particularly that interesting. Now I find that there's a lot of cool stuff out there, but I came late to the party, actually.
Yeah, because I started listening to them in the late noughties, I think 2009 or something like that. That's when I first started listening to podcasts.
No, that's not then. You'd hear about them. But I didn't follow anything in particular.
When I first started listening to them, actually, I thought you had to pay for them, and I'm thinking, I don't want to pay for that. I'm already paying for this and this and this. So.
Right, makes sense. There was some years there. My son was born in 2007, and we just ended up, we listened to a lot of Walk Off the Earth and Taylor Swift. So.
Okay, yeah. Taylor Swift.
Really? I love Taylor Swift.
She needs to work with Paul.
I wouldn't be surprised if that happened.
No, because I do know that they get on with each other, because isn't there that footage of him actually playing bass for Shake It Off or something, I think. him and Dave Grohl on stage with Taylor Swift.
That's great. That would be a trio I'd like to hang with.
Absolutely.
I've been reading Dave Grohl's book. And it's great.
Throw Alice Cooper in there, and you've got a great team there.
Right. Not the Hollywood vampires.
Hey, this is Brian with Concerts That Made Us podcast, and you're listening to Pods Like Us, a great show about other great shows.
See, I'm not that interested.
I think you're incredibly interesting, actually. You'll suddenly have fans sending you mail. You'll get more mail than
All
Ed.
right.
Here you go. I don't really know about that. Ed's a superstar.
Yeah. I don't even know how all this works. I show up on Sunday night when we record, and we talk a couple times during the week, and that's kind of what I do. He puts the shows together, and he does it all.
Yeah, I'm looking forward actually to sometime soon where Lonnie will be back involved again, and you'll all three be on the same show together. Hopefully.
We did one show with Darren, and we've done one show with Kit. So we're going to do one with Lonnie coming up. That'll be fun.
Absolutely.
I don't think I've even spoken to Lonnie in longer than I can say. Maybe a text or something. But that's about it.
It'd be like a reassembly of the three amigos, shall we say? See if you can do the dance as well to go with it.
Yes. Yeah. So that could be fun.
Absolutely.
And I'm working on.
So I was going to actually say, out of interest, and I'm going to have to go to this because I've been thinking about it all the way through. So what is this project that you're actually working on?
Well, I moved to a town in East Texas, and turns out that it had a huge influence on the state history of why Texas is the way it is. And I'll let everybody ponder what that statement means. And so there's a local story about right after the Civil War, and it has to do with gunfight in the town square, and the story itself was like, well, that's kind of interesting. And then when I started looking into it, the actual history of it is a lot more complex and extends from before Texas was even a state all the way through the end of the 19th century. So I don't want to go into too much detail, but this was a real central point in race relations and how the state evolved. And that's kind of what that book's about.
Wow.
Yeah,
so, how far are you really into it?
Well, I've spent about 2 years researching it, because you had to go through Civil War records and military records and what we have here in town, and so I did initially start off just working on this story about what happened in the town square, and the more I learned, the more I realized, well, this is really kind of bigger, because there's a figure in Texas history who is the guy who took Texas out of the Union illegally, as it turns out, but he kind of destroyed Sam Houston's career, and he was actually, after the Civil War, the man that Texas chose to send back up to Washington to represent the state.
Right.
And the politicians up there said, well, that's crazy. You're not going to send the guy who took you out, seceded, and just sending him right back here. And so they didn't seat him. And that had a huge influence on what happened later. He became a Supreme Court justice in Texas, became a governor, helped found the University of Texas. But he was kind of committed to what is currently referred to as white supremacy.
Right.
So he had a huge influence on the state. So the thing interesting for me, there's a book out right now called "Forget the Alamo."
Okay.
And there's a controversy going on about the telling of the story. Right now we tend to teach myth. And, there's an argument to be made that, myth inspires and can be a good thing, but it rarely tells the truth. And it tends to marginalize stories that are important. And so, huge controversy in San Antonio right now because they're actually working on expanding the story that would include the Native Americans who were there, the Hispanic community, and what was really going on. But there are those people who want the John Wayne version of the Alamo.
Yep.
And so there's that fight. And that's tied into this whole discussion now about critical race theory or the 1619 Project. And, there are people who really don't want the history of the country told or taught in a way that would be more honest. They would prefer the myth. So I see that in the book I'm writing and some of the other things that are going on in the country and in the state. So that's where we're at.
Wow. So have you got like a publisher and a date for that?
Well, I have some people working on it. The thing is, it's taken me, I'm right at the point where, okay, now I'm going to start putting things together. I've written some things here and there, but it needs a continuing narrative, which I don't really have. So I finished the research. I know what I need to know. So now it's to really work on the narrative. So I know I don't have a publishing date or anything like that. But
right, okay. So you've not got a publisher or anything backing you either, or have you?
Well, no. There's a historical society that I'm working with, and I'm learning how to work that terrain as well. It does require getting interest in various groups. So the first thing I'm going to do is work with this the Smith County Historical Society and give some talks and hopefully get some talk and interest going.
It's definitely fascinating. I'm sure that you'll have people, in historical societies clamoring for things like that, really.
Well, I hope so. There is a political climate here that makes it more difficult than it should be.
Yeah.
Because I think the position that I am taking with this is not necessarily going to follow in line with the accepted narrative. And so, some people will be all about that. Some people won't.
Yes. Yeah, I'd like. I mean, I remember that there's that phrase, isn't there? I don't know who came up with it. Was it where history is written by the victors
victor.
or something?
Yes.
And and to a degree, that's true. But it'd be nice if we start to actually have truth rather than assumed truth or truths that people make up, shall we say?
Right. Well, we as a country, the truth is that the idea of one race being dominant has been a part of our history.
Yeah.
And it's been, I don't know, 130 years. Not longer than that, really. But, the greatness of our country is that we do evolve and we do change. And, what has occurred in this country in the past century is pretty incredible, with women's suffrage and civil rights and the women's movement and the ecology. I mean, there's a lot of things that have occurred because we can do that without too much problem. But there is a portion of our country who still believe that the introduction into our society of other cultures is not a strength, but that it's a weakness. And that's why we find ourselves, I think, in the difficulty we are in right now.
Absolutely.
Boy, this turned political real fast, didn't it?
It really did, didn't it? Right. Let's get back to the podcast again. So,
sorry about the turn.
No, I think it makes it more interesting for people because now people know that you're more than just the Beatles, man.
Well, yes, I am, and yet the Beatles influenced my way of thinking, I believe. So there's a tie. I'm fully aware that lyrics and thoughts and they had a huge influence on me.
So, hey, this is Tim from Bad Counsel. You want some good counsel? Keep listening to the smooth, dulcet tones of Marv on Pods Like Us.
Absolutely.
I personally don't see how you can be a really conservative person and be a Beatles fan, but I know there are. But
no, I don't really get that either. Yeah, it's like what is it? Going into that other thing that you didn't really touch on, you just mentioned in passing about the Star Trek thing. It's like people moaning about inclusivity in the new Star Trek, and I think, yeah, but there's been inclusivity in Star Trek since day one, because you had the black communications officer, and you got the Chinese man at the helm. I mean, so. And then the Russian, and you've got an alien there as the science officer, and it always was that way. It's just that the world's changed in that time, and the show's changed to reflect the times that it's in. I mean, really.
But that was a continuing battle because Gene Roddenberry, I mean, they were concerned about the sales of the series in the South because of Uhura, and that Spock looked satanic.
Yes. Yep.
Some of the early publicity pictures of Star Trek had his ears airbrushed. Just incredible to think of that they actually did that. But they put Chekhov in there in the midst of the height of the Cold War. Here's a Russian who's coming in. So,
with a fantastic Davy Jones wig.
Yes, indeed. But that was a battle he fought his whole broadcasting life was. So when the Next Generation came out, that was no doubt that was the way it was supposed to be.
Absolutely. I mean, from day one, the program was always full of. The subject matter was always very often based on what was going on in the world around that time. So you had you had racism that was approached, basically racism, but they approached it in a different way so that they could get away with it. So you'd have this planet with two races. One was white on one side, black on the other side of the faces. So they had that as the racial issue, which, I don't know how it got by the studios, really, because that was so obvious. And then you had anti-war episodes as well, because you had Vietnam probably started by then. So but it was always that way inclined. It was always that way with the inclusivity and with the subject matter.
Yeah, well, the first interracial kiss on TV was Kirk and Uhura. So they were always
first use of the word "damn." Oh no, not damn, hell. Damn. He says, "Let's get the hell out of here," doesn't he? At the end of the fantastic city on the edge of forever.
I would have thought it was Bones. Damn it, Jim! I'm a doctor.
Oh yes, that's him. Keep saying "damn it." Yeah, but yeah.
As a matter of fact, my wife had there was a chat room years ago, and one of the guys' names was "Damn it, Jim."
Brilliant.
Yeah,
I miss chat rooms. Those were the days.
Right.
Right. Kids don't know the born today. Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was a different world. It happens fast, I tell my son sometimes my biggest regret is that I don't get to see what comes next.
Biggest regret
is that I don't get to see what comes next. I mean, I just feel like we're on the edge of great things, in space and in the ocean, and I mean, we're just right on, and energy. We're right on the edge, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to make it.
Dear me. Well, we've made it long enough to see Bill Shatner actually go into space.
Go into space, and I'd lived long enough to see the entire rooftop concert.
Yes. Yep. I've got that.
And I got that
to look forward to.
Yes.
So, where can people get hold of you if they want to, and how can they find the show?
Well, the show is When They Was Fab, and I believe it's on Podbean. You find it where you find your finest podcasts.
Yeah.
And, if you want to get a hold of me, you can write me at Liddypool. Get that? LIDDYPOOL 20 at gmail.com.
That's great. Anyway, John, this was fantastic talking with you. It was, shall we say, fab and gear.
Indeed. It was a lot of fun, and I'll have to listen to it so I can find out more about me. Cause
that's right.
It was all on the fly.
That's brilliant. That's great. And I still think that the Beatles need to come out with a clothing range now that's based on all those clothes from Get Back. Because those shirts are incredible.
It's true. Oh wow, yeah. Some of the fashions are just. I mean, you could do a whole thing with Glenn Johns alone.
Oh yeah, the other day somebody put Glenn Johns Elton John before Elton John was Elton John.
Well, there you go. Maybe he was influenced. That's true. Well,
that's true. Anyway, you can get hold
we'll see
of
what happens
Pods
with
Like Us at. Yeah, go on, John.
No, nothing that I was saying at that point was important at all. Go ahead.
Okay. So you can get hold of Pods Like Us at gmail.com and find us on any podcasting platform. I don't know why I say all this, John, because obviously they know where to find the show because they're listening to it.
They're listening to it right now. That's
right. So just keep listening.
Right. But what is it? Ring the bell or something? Subscribe.
That's right.
Come back.
Yeah, subscribe, follow, like, do all those groovy things.
Yes. Well, this was a lot of fun, and thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and hope you listened again to another episode of Pods Like Us.
Hello? Okay.
Turn the volume up.
Now I can hear you.
You can hear me?
I can hear you.
That's good.
Can you hear?
I can hear you as well. Yep.
Well, then it's working, I guess.
I guess. I have no idea. I've never used Zencaster as a host before.
No? Well, it's just like this.
Obviously. You'll have to excuse me, I've got an infection.
That's okay. The world has an infection.
We do, but luckily it's not that.
Well,
so
I was
hope
going
not.
just to that. There's all sorts of stuff going wrong with this. So let's see. I'm looking at your outline here.
Outline, bullet list.
Let's see.
Because we don't need to go into how the show's put together and how it's edited and where the idea of the show came from. Because I've already had the best editor in podcast show before that.
All the podcasting stuff, because the truth is Ed does all that. I show up. That's my big podcast experience.
I'm not trying to be sarcastic with that either. I'm very I think Ed is an incredible podcaster.
Yeah, he's made it very easy for me to just. I mean, we'll probably get into the history of how I all came to this, but it was real easy, and I just kind of walked in and didn't know what was going on. So, what my talent really was, I could just kind of talk about the Beatles for a while.
Okay, well we'll get into the show straight away then. Looking forward to getting to know the man behind Jon Stone.
Oh dear,
the man behind the books.
Well, maybe I'll discover a few things too as we go. I didn't know that about myself.
That was me today. I was supposed to do an hour or an hour and a half as a guest on somebody's show where they were interviewing me, funnily enough. And it ended up being 3.5 to 3.75 of hours. And I just kept talking and I think I surprised him because I kept mentioning things that he was like, oh, I never expected to hear that. So we're talking about the Beatles and the music and Queen, and I got Bob Dylan in there. He's not a fan of Bob Dylan, and
well, he's not worth talking to then.
Well, there you go. You see, and you have to allow some people just to be wrong in life, I suppose.
Yeah, you have to, because they are.
You have to take them as they are, even though they are wrong to have that opinion about Bob.
It's true. I had
But,
kind of a similar experience. I had an opportunity to talk to Yoko, and it was supposed to last like 10 minutes, and it went for almost an hour and a half, which was really
I would be
quite thrilling.
fascinated. I'd have a lovely long chat with Yoko. She's an incredible woman, got to be said, in many ways, artistically and as a person in herself.
But when I said I was that I had interviewed Yoko, I was surprised at the blowback. Like, oh my God, what was that like? It was like, it was great. She was engaging and nice, and the interview that was supposed to go for 10 minutes went for an hour and a half. So that was real nice.
I mean, I posted up. Yeah, I posted up something the other day. They were on about Yoko or whatever, and I said on this post, I put, I happen to love Yoko Ono and the Plastic Ono Band, and I love the Fly album as well.
Right.
I think musically, they're very interesting albums. As a musician to listen to, and to see where John was able to push himself as a guitarist, which I don't think in his solo career he was able to do as much as he was with Yoko's material.
Yeah, I think it allowed him to just kind of let his freak flag fly. He just did something that was instinctive rather than,
Louise is just passing me a Beatles mug with a coffee in it. Which is rather fitting.
I've over the years gotten my wife to, one of my favorite Yoko quotes is, "What a bastard the world is." She loved that.
Yes.
It's like, yes, that's exactly.
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true. I think. Okay, so we'll start this show now because we seem to be going into areas. That,
we're into it already.
We're into it already. So yes, that was a lot of fun, John.
Yeah, that was real nice. I had no idea what to expect, and that was.
Now I don't know what to expect from Ed when he suggested these dates, hasn't he? And I'm thinking, so what day is the 12th of the 12th?
Let me see. I have that.
Is that a Sunday
here? They're all Sundays, I believe.
Because he's put to me. He's put the 12th of the 12th or 12/11.
Hold on, let me see. That's not what I want. He sent me a list of what was coming up.
See, to me on a Sunday, to me it'd be the problem is the time difference. So to me it'd be good at say 2:30 in the afternoon, but then that would be 8:30 in the morning for yourselves.
Oh, right,
which is a bit early for a Sunday, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it could be, but I don't know that it matters that much to me. I can certainly wake up and. Well, as far as time-wise, I will be accommodating. How's that? Whatever. If Ed's willing to wake up early.
Well, he stayed awake to talk to Nick the other day. Crikey.
He just doesn't sleep.
No, I don't think so.
My best research writing time is late at night. My wife and child are in bed and asleep, and so I come up to the office and start writing, and I'll be going at 2:30, 3 o'clock, and it'll pop up and send me something. It's like, wow.
So
but I'm awake, so I guess he could be too. But I think I get up earlier than he does.
So it's 11th is the Saturday and the 12th is the Sunday. So I'm open to either of those at 8:30 in the morning your time. So if you both want to discuss that between you, and I'm okay with either the Saturday or the Sunday.
Okay.
The 11th or the 12th.
All right. I'll write that down. Okay. I'll see what he wants to do. And if he doesn't want to do that at all, I'll let him contact you and negotiate.
Yes, because if he wants to do it later in the day, then we'll have to do it by the phone, and he doesn't like using Zoom.
Okay, yeah.
Because I'll be driving a van. I'll be even if I'm on a break, I'll be driving a van at that point, so I won't have a laptop or computer with me.
No, and that's not what we do.
No.
We don't drive and do other things.
No, we don't, because that's dangerous.
Yeah.
It is. I park up when I've done that before, actually. Anyway, John, I'll let you get on.
Thank you. Well, I hope to talk to you again soon.
Me too.
Obviously the 11th or 12th will be one. So
that'll be great. Okay, thank you. Take care, John.
Take care, Martin.
Thank you.
Right, bye-bye.